I'm AP Townley, and this is Roleplay Culture. Druids are more well known for the animals they turn into, or what else they might use their wild shape for, than they are for actual spellcasting. Which is a bit strange, considering they are full spellcasters. This is not to say that there aren't some serious winners on the Druid spell list. Any DM who's had their poor ogre torn apart by an actual pack of wolves, summoned by said Druid, knows this pain. But for the sake of argument, let's maybe consider a few other options, beyond one of the most banned spells in D&D. Still, the Druid spell list has some winners, but it can be kind of awkward, a little weird, which makes sense for someone who's spending all their time, living in the woods.
Oh, okay.
So let's explore 5 underrated spells for the Druid in D&D 5e. Like usual, we'll choose one spell from each level 1 to 5. Number 1, Longstrider. One of the issues we're going to have to face is the dreaded concentration mechanic. Some spells, when they are cast, require the caster to maintain concentration for the duration of the spell. When they are damaged, they must make a concentration check, which is a special constitution saving throw, DC 10 or half the damage, whichever's higher, or lose the spell. Certain other effects can trigger this as well. But most importantly, you can only have one concentration spell going at any time, and that's a problem. Many of the Druid's best spells require concentration, and we have to work around that. So that is why we're going to try and focus on spells without this mechanic. Our first pick is Longstrider. This first level transmutation spell takes an action to cast and does one simple thing. It adds 10 feet to the target's base walking speed. That's it. Easy as that. You thought fighting a grizzly bear was rough? Well, now that bear can run you down even faster. Or better yet, cast it on the monk or the barbarian. Those fast little terrors were bad enough. Now let's make them even faster. Honestly, there's nothing flashy about this spell. Its effect is pretty basic, but there are a few things about this spell that I really like. The first, I already mentioned. It's not restricted to just the caster. You can cast it on any of your allies. The second is that this spell lasts for an hour, with no concentration. That means you don't need to waste precious time during combat to cast this spell. You can cast it well before going into that cave that definitely isn't full of goblins. And it should last you through the encounter. Because this spell doesn't require concentration, it lasts a while. You can cast it on multiple people without much effort, or upcast it. You can target one additional person per level, which is pretty good. I think this spell actually shines more towards the mid to late tier of game. When your higher level spell slots are used for your big flashy explosions and concentration spells, you might struggle to get good use out of your lower level spell slots. Making yourself or some of your more melee-oriented companions faster can make good use of your resources. Number 2, Augury. What are Druids? Like, in the real world, what are they? Well, they were high-ranking members of the priest class in ancient Celtic traditions. Imagine a bunch of Celtic woads conversing around a table on whether or not to go to war with the invading Romans. They turn to their wise advisor and ask for advice from the spirits and the gods. That wise individual draws finger bones of deer, etched with ancient runes and covered in blood, to cast on the ground and read for a sign of what to do. Now that image is not a wizard or a cleric, it's a druid. And more specifically, it's a druid casting Augury. This second level divination spell has a casting time of a minute. It requires 25 gold piece marked bones or sticks or etc. You receive an omen about a specific course of action you plan to take in the next 30 minutes. This omen takes form in one of 4 ways. Wheel, for good results. There's a treasure at the end of that hallway you plan on going down. Woe, for bad results. That hallway's trapped. Wheel and woe for both good and bad results. There is a treasure chest at the end of that hallway. but it's trapped. Or just nothing, because it's a frickin' hallway. One of the reasons this spell is underrated is that until Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it was only on the Cleric spell list, but now it's on their Druid spell list as well, as long as with the Wizard. What I like about this spell in particular is that it's a ritual. A quick word about rituals in D&D 5e. You can cast a spell as normal, or, alternatively, you can cast it as a ritual adding 10 minutes to the casting time, but not requiring a spell slot, if it's a ritual spell. Nice. The only primary casting class that doesn't use rituals is the Sorcerer. Artificers get it, as well as when Warlocks with the right invocations can get rituals. You can even take a feat to get access to rituals. So then it seems a shame that only the Wizard seems to take advantage of this type of spellcasting, though admittedly, their spellbooks leave them better suited for the task. But in my opinion, every ritual casting class should have at least one ritual in their repertoire, and the Augury spell is my top choice. Casting the Bone seems very fitting for the old Wood Witch of the Forest. But before all the DMs out there start tearing their hair out, contemplating their parties, ritualizing every nook and cranny of their dungeons, have no fear. There is a limiter baked into this spell. Every subsequent casting of the spell has a 25% chance to produce a random result. Not necessarily wrong, mind you, but random. So your Druid's gonna have a little bit of work to do anyway. Number 3, Meld into Stone. The game is called Dungeons and Dragons, and when we play it, we assume we're going to go into the occasional dungeon. So stone walls and the like should be rather frequent. That brings us to this little rare gem of a spell, which I confess I myself am not particularly familiar with, which ought to tell you how underrated it is, or at least the finer details of the spell anyway. This third level transmutation spell takes an action to cast and lasts for a whopping 8 hours with no concentration. This spell allows you to step into a stone surface big enough to contain you. You meld within and become indistinguishable from the stone. You can't see, and your perception checks to hear are at disadvantage. You can't move further into the stone, but you can cast spells on yourself, but otherwise you can't move except to leave the stone, which ends the spell. You're reasonably safe inside this stone, though if it's partially destroyed, you are expelled and you take 66 damage. And the complete destruction of that stone does the same, but a flat 50 points of damage. Ouch. But stone is pretty tough, so you should be fine. There are a few interesting things to note about this spell. Just like our last entry, this is a ritual, and unlike Augury, there are no restrictions on how often we can use it other than time. Also, unlike what you might think, this spell doesn't have a range of self, but of touch. And it doesn't require concentration. So with enough time, you can entomb an entire party into stone for one heck of an ambush. You can protect yourself from those wishing you harm or hide from unwanted attention. This is definitely what I would call a shenanigan spell. And it lasts for 8 hours, dude. Why have we not used this spell more? Number 4, Fire Shield. This is an oldie but goodie. I remember using this spell extensively in 3rd edition, to good effect. But sadly, with 5th edition, it seems to have fallen to the wayside. Probably because it was only available to the Wizard. And unless you're playing a Bladesinger, you don't usually want a Wizard to get close to the enemy to make use of this spell. But with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, this spell is now available to Druids, and that makes things a little more interesting. This 4th level evocation spell takes an action to cast, has a range of self, so you can only use it on yourself, and lasts for 10 minutes with no concentration, which is a good amount of time. When you cast this spell, you decide to have a warm shield or chill shield, as you're wreathed in flames that do give off some light. Their effects are simple. The warm shield gives you resistance to cold damage and deals 2d8 fire damage to anyone within 5 feet of you that hits you with a melee attack. The chill shield does the opposite, with resistance to fire damage and dealing cold damage. So this spell's like nasty on Druids, especially a Moon Druid. I mean, you thought chewing through all those hit points from Wild Shape was bad. Wait till you have to fight a dinosaur that's on fire. One of the downsides of those animals that Druids can turn into is they tend to have a low armor class. But now, you punish that enemy for doing you damage every time they hit you. And I do mean every time it hits you. This effect doesn't require your reaction or anything. It just happens. And even better, this spell doesn't even require concentration, so beating on your flaming bear won't cause you to lose the spell. I want to be a flaming velociraptor so bad. Number 5, Contagion. It might be a little anachronistic for a druid, a lover of nature, to be spreading disease, but hey, diseases are life too. This 5th level necromancy spell takes an action to cast, requires touch, and can, well, more on that in a bit. Personally, it's the necromancy part of the spell that's the weirdest for me, for a druid to be casting. But life and death, right? When you cast this spell, you touch your target, and they are now poisoned. Poisoned. No saving throw to resist this. Nothing. Being poisoned sucks. Let's refresh you on that. They have disadvantage on all attack rolls and ability checks. It's very rare to be able to impose the poison condition on another as a player. Oh sure, it can happen to us all the time. But for us to be able to do it, not often. At the end of the target's turn, every turn, they get to make a Constitution saving throw. If they succeed on 3 of them, the spell ends. If they fail 3 of them, the poison condition ends and they contract a disease. That means, with no saving throw, your target suffers at least 3 rounds of the poison condition and as many as 6 rounds. And we haven't gotten to the meat of the spell yet. For the next 7 days, they suffer from one of 6 diseases of your choice. Let's discuss the different infectious dooms you can wreak upon the world. Blinding sickness. They suffer disadvantage on wisdom checks and saving throws. And they're blind. Whoever has charm spells is going to love you. Filth fever gives disadvantage on strength checks and saving throws and attack rolls that use strength. So the barbarians are going to hate you. Flesh rot. Disadvantage on just charisma checks. Yeah, that's kind of boring, right? Oh, what's this last little part here? Vulnerability to all damage? What? That's insane. Why don't we use this more? Mind fire. Disadvantage on intelligence checks and saving throws, as well as acting as if they're under the influence of the confusion spell in combat, meaning they roll on a chart every round which decides on what random thing they do. So now wizards are ticked off at you. Seizure. Disadvantage on dexterity checks, saving throws, and attack rolls that use dexterity. This one really sucks, and now the rangers and rogues hate you too. Oh, and finally, slimy doom, which just sounds gross. They bleed uncontrollably. Ugh. Disadvantage on constitution checks and saving throws, and oh my god, spellcasters are gonna loathe this. Oh, and there's this little nugget. If they take any damage, they're stunned until the end of their next turn. No saving throw. It's basically Super Ebola. All of these are terrible, or awesome, depending on which side of the equation you're on. I think this spell is underrated because for 5th level spells, it doesn't really do any direct damage. But I like it because even though it does allow a saving throw, and a constitution saving throw at that, it still has effects regardless. You get like 3 to 6 rounds of the poison condition on your enemy, whether they save or not. Even if the creature has legendary resistances, it has to pass a saving throw or use its resistances 3 times to make it through. And if something epic is wasting its legendary resistances on your spell, that is nothing but good news for you and your friends. And unless it's immune to the poison condition, it's fighting with disadvantage. So that is our list of 5 underrated spells for the Druid in D&D 5e. If you want more episodes like this, then you're going to have to subscribe, ring that bell, smash that like button, leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the parlor.